Welcome back to the Red Pill Review, looking at seduction and other such matters of the heart. Today we're looking at the second principle of the Red Pill argument for seduction, which is game is necessary. So the claim basically is that men suffer probably more than women because, in part, that we are secretly trained and controlled by women to serve them. And therefore seduction is a necessary evil, a technique that we need to escape our enslavement. You know, this sounds a little ridiculous, I know, but this is really the red pill view of men. We are seen as people who have been tricked into being female slaves and that we're at war. And I was quite surprised when I did my review. I was like, wow, I didn't know they felt that strongly about it. I knew there was, before going in, I knew there'd be some views like it's harder for men to get laid than women, but it's really gotten much stronger than that. It's more like men are under attack and we have to fight back with whatever weapons are at hand. And the weapon they're suggesting is seduction. This is a range in the red pill community. There are some guys who are really strong on this and others who are a little gentler. But there's many groups or subgroups within the manosphere blame women for men's problems. Men going their own way, MGTOW, which is a new one for me, and some of the other groups, incels, really shift the responsibility for their own pain onto women specifically as a group. So women are often portrayed in the red pill community as manipulative, superficial, somehow programmed and conditioned by the state, incapable of unconditional love, that one surprised me, incapable of kindness, and responsible for maliciously influencing men into becoming these kind of nice guy wimps that can be controlled. The argument being, women use seduction to enslave us, so we need to use seduction to fight back. It also is the claim around hypergamy, which is the idea that if you don't impress your woman enough, if you don't tick enough of the boxes, especially the very materialistic ones, she's going to trade you in for a better deal first chance she gets. So there's this constant risk to men that seduction protects them out against. You might not be rich and famous, but you can seduce a woman to overcome that risk of hypergamy. So all of these points, all of these arguments naturally lead to the justification of seduction. Men have it worse. We need to protect ourselves from being manipulatively seduced by becoming manipulative seducers ourselves. So game is like a protective shield. Unfortunately, this whole thing is based on some very faulty reasoning and some very unproven assumptions, which we'll go into today. The idea that women are the only ones being manipulative, of course, being the worst part, because that's an outright lie. So let's look at assumption number one. There's an assumption that male integrity is punished by women, that being nice or honourable or loyal won't get you far in the world with women. You'll be punished for it and traded in for a bad boy. I really struggled to understand whether the red pill community is for integrity or against it. It's a difficult one because so much of their work says we're for integrity, you've got to be a man of integrity, and then so much of their work says you've basically got to manipulate people with seduction. And I don't know how they marry these two concepts together. They say you've got to have integrity, and then in another sentence they'll say women will punish you if you try to have integrity. So I really don't know where they're coming from. And I'll just turn off that little noise there. I wasn't really sure where to go with this because the argument was unclear, and it seems to be basically that sometimes the idea of being a nice guy, which is very false, and the red pill community is very much against being falsely nice, but that gets conflated with being honourable and having integrity, and I don't know where exactly they draw the line. But one thing I've got to ask is, if male integrity really is punished by women, why is seduction the answer to that? Why can't we just role model and influence women through the power of our frame to respect integrity, to only reward them when they respect integrity, and to not reward them for falling for seduction or falling for nice guy manipulation tactics? But before I can go anywhere further with this point that male integrity is punished by women, Red pill needs to make a clear stand. Are you for integrity or are you against it? Okay? Because if you're for it, then you're against seduction. And if you're for seduction, you're against integrity. These are incompatible concepts. Integrity is full honesty and full valued living. Those things must be sacrificed for seduction. For you to trick someone into being more attracted to you than they naturally are, you have to put down honesty. You have to put away spontaneous expression and replace it with carefully strategic expression. They cannot coincide. So let's move on to assumption number 2. This is a big one. All women are programmed to manipulate men through sexuality. So there's a logical fallacy that seems to originate from the red pill community's experience with women is generally representative of all male-female relationships. Again, the bandwagon effect coming in here. The red pill community is a very closed echo chamber. They all agreeing with each other quite vehemently, never arguing against each other, if only to prove each other even more right. And they believe that their experience with women is somehow representative. That outside of the community, all other men are having similar experiences and all other women are behaving in a similar way. So when a man in the red pill community gets sexually manipulated by a woman, he goes, woman, what are you going to do? They're at it again. Rather than this particular woman used this on a guy like me, and that might not be representative. They don't think like that, and so it seems to me. The obvious factor that comes into this is the red pill community is brought together by men who have had bad experiences with women. That is not a representative sample of men. I mean, we've all had bad experiences with all people. But if you've had nothing but awful experiences with women, and you're surrounded by other guys who have nothing but awful experiences with women, you're going to get a very skewed perspective on the world. What made this really clear to me, I used to work for the Department of Corrections, and I used to work with child sex offenders. And all day long, I spent time interviewing and rehabilitating child sex offenders. I got to a point where I couldn't trust a guy to babysit a kid because I thought all men were child sex offenders. The truth was, I was seeing a fraction of a percentage of the community. It's just I was seeing them all the time. And so it creates a bias where I think all guys are like this because all the guys in my life were like this. Except for the ones outside of work, I hope. It's the same as true with red pill. Just because all the women in your life have been awful, nasty and manipulative, and all your friends in red pill community confirm that they've had similar experiences, that's still not evidence of how women are. All that's evidence of is how the women that you attract are. And it might be something about you that's creating that consistency. Just like me choosing to be a probation officer created a consistency in seeing criminals, you choosing to be whatever it is that you are, namely someone who's not having integrity perhaps, is probably very attractive to manipulative, abusive, superficial women who are not the majority. Not my experience. So the idea that all women can and will exploit honourable men is not supported by citations, it's not supported by scientific evidence. The only evidence it's supported by is anecdotal experience within the red pill community. My girlfriend, she doesn't use sexual manipulation against me as far as I'm aware. Does that mean I've found the only rare exception? Or are we representative of other varieties of men and women relationships? Am I the only one who's found a non-manipulative girl? Or is it more likely that the red pill community has an overrepresented view of manipulative girls, an overrepresented experience of them? You know, if you're going to nightclubs to meet women, you're going to get nightclub women. That's not all women. Okay? So, this vicious all women are the same fallacious assumption goes throughout all the red pill justification for seduction, and it's frankly just unproven. It's much more scientifically accurate to say that if you are a victim, you will be selected by abusive people, who are only a small percentage of the population, and you will repeat this experience because you have a cognitive bias and create a self-fulfilling prophecy. You will attract predators by being a victim, and it will seem like the world's full of predators. It's just they're all coming to you and they're ignoring everybody else. Okay? I have no doubt that many of the men in the red pill community also have histories of being bullied, okay, or being mistreated by their bosses or other people beyond the women they're attracted to, treating them like shit. Yeah. Assumption number 3, that all these problems are solved by game. That seduction is a solution to this maltreatment. So let's assume for a second that red pill's correct, that women are scheming, manipulative, hypergamous bitches, right? Let's assume that that's true, even though it's clearly not. Is this still justification for seduction? An eye for an eye? Is the idea of responding to seduction by, with seduction helpful? There's kind of different justifications for this in red pill. Like I said, there's kind of a misogynistic side of red pill and there's a more reasonable side. And the misogynistic side says, seduce women because those bitches deserve it. They deserve to be manipulated. And the more reasonable side say something more along the lines of, look, women want to be seduced. This is the best way to interact with them. This is what suits their psychology. All of them, no matter what sort of side of the spectrum they're on, they're all claiming that all women are the same and that their experiences with women are representative. One thing that's not explored is men stepping up, which is interesting because a lot of red pill, especially the red pill stuff outside of seduction, really goes on at length about men stepping up and being leaders. And yet when it comes to seduction, we're supposed to follow the lead of manipulative women by being manipulative ourselves. It's quite a contradiction. If we really are going to step up, shouldn't we role model integrity and non-manipulative behaviours until they follow us? An eye for an eye and we all go blind. I cannot see how us trying to out-manipulate each other is going to end in some sort of enjoyable result. I really can't. Assumption number 4 is a big one. It's a huge one throughout the manosphere, which is men have it worse than women. That these two groups are somehow comparable in suffering, and that men coming out worse, and that the whole feminism thing is a lie, that it's females have always had the upper hand, or at least they do now. So game is used as an equalizer. You must seduce women because we're disadvantaged. This is our weapon to balance the scales. And there's a lot of statistical evidence for how men suffer and how they suffer more than women. We've got higher suicide rates, higher prison rates, higher workplace fatalities, lower life expectancy, on and on and on. There's a lot of statistics that say, hey, men have it worse. But to argue that this justifies seduction, you have to be able to make 3 points. First is, you have to prove that men suffer worse overall and therefore need some sort of handicap. You have to prove that male suffering is directly related to women and our interactions with women, that women cause the suffering, and therefore whatever advantage we have has to be directed at women. And 3, that advantage must be seduction. Otherwise, you're just randomly correlating male suffering with male-female relationships. You're assuming that those are connected, and before you can justify seduction, you must prove that those things are connected. Trouble is, there's equal lists for statistics about how women suffer worse than men, and most scientific studies, while they might be biased by feminism, usually end up showing that overall it sucks more to be a woman than it does to be a man. But we all suffer, and that's how I see it. Now, I can't really say whether or not men or women suffer worse. I can't even enter into that argument because I don't know. But what I can critique is the second point, which is that men suffer worse because of women. That I don't see evidence for. I believe that's a claim without evidence, and therefore essentially untrue. Red Pill might claim that the reason men are suffering so much is because of women, but there are such better explanations for male suffering than female oppression. Things like higher rates of mental illness going untreated. Now, there's nothing that stops us getting treatment. There is no psychologist in the world who will say, I can't see you because you're a man, and yet we choose not to. Our depression rates are through the roof, and yet we choose not to get medication. We choose not to speak openly about suicide. These are our decisions. It doesn't matter what environment we're living in, even if we're living in a culture that says men have got to be hard and keep their emotions to themselves. And even if that culture was designed and perpetrated by women, which I see no evidence for, It really looks like it was designed by men. Even if all that was true, there's still nothing stopping us. It's just like quite often the argument against the feminism pay gap myth is that, look, if a woman wants to get into the STEM field, if she wants to become a scientist, she can. No one's going to stop her. She can go into those high-earning fields. Well, if a man wants to go and see a psychologist, there's nothing that can stop him either. The same argument applies. The most likely reason that men suffer, whether we suffer worse or less doesn't matter, we do suffer, it's because we're our own worst enemies. We choose to do shit jobs, right? We choose not to go see the psychologist or the doctor about our problems. We choose to promote movies that support unrealistic and unfair stereotypes of men, like James Bond. I looked it up. All James Bond movies were written and directed by men. No female influence there. And James Bond is probably the number one influence on our fathers, who were the number one influence on us, right? So the idea that women did this is very unrealistic. We dug our own graves. I absolutely believe that men suffer. I do not believe that women cause that suffering, and even if they did, I don't believe seduction's the answer. The answer is to take responsibility for our own decisions and sort out our shit. So in conclusion, let me start by saying I absolutely agree that some women out there use seductive, manipulative techniques to subjugate and control men. Just like some men use similar techniques on women. It's back and forth. Also say I agree that there's certain fringe elements of feminism that promote the control and subjugation of men. And the general media can be pretty unrealistic about how we should interact with each other, like chick flicks and stuff are just full of shit. But this pressure around performance for men exists in society. It comes from ourselves. And it certainly doesn't justify a lack of integrity. Seduction is like drinking poison to cure your cancer. You're just going to go from bad to worse. It's integrity that's going to pull us out of this hole. It's being honest about our problems that will get us to the psychologist. It'll be changing a job that sucks for us, which will get us away from the workplace fatalities. You know, all the problems that were listed that affect men can be solved by men without the use of seduction. It's clear. And even if women are manipulative, they're not going to learn any better if we're manipulative too. Somebody needs to lead the way, and if Red Pill really is for integrity and leadership, then they'll be recommending that men lead the way, instead of men following seduction with seduction. So that's my argument on that, and I'll see you for the next one. Jesus, I went on for a while this time. See you for the next one on the Red Pill principle argument or idea that women want a bad boy. See you there.